Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Hello, Josh, my friend. There's all sorts of Cyberpunk things dripping out of all these journalists that got to go play it. We didn't sadly get an invite, but we're going to do the next best thing and just comb all the information that's out there to make a big old master list. Because to be honest, that's the thing I'm trying to find anyway. I'm just trying to find a big old breakdown of all the important things. I don't necessarily want the nuance. I want a big old list of all the best things. So I've done that. I've combed a variety of different sources, and I've just sort of brought together all the big features that you need to know about. Because this is one of the most confident showings of Cyberpunk so far. And I think it's easy to forget that it was first shown back in 2012, or they first teased it back then. And looking at all the comparisons of the recent gameplay footage, the ones from the Night City Wire event that was the other day, versus even things from a couple of years ago or 3 years ago, there's a pretty big change, and it feels like this is like one of the most confident showings they've had so far. I'm just going to break some stuff down. So first up, the way that the game works, you don't really have any cutscenes. You're constantly in control of your character. You can talk to literally anybody. You can just look at them and you sort of interact with them the same way as Red Dead 2, where there's always like a sort of contextual menu that'll pop up as you're talking, as you're looking at someone. They'll also react to you. So if someone, Alana Pierce noted in her coverage that if she was looking at someone who was on their phone, and as she continued to look at them, they came out of that animation and sort of addressed the character and just said, what do you want? And you can sort of talk to them that way. So that's one thing, but the main thing to take away is that there's really no cutscenes. Again, Pierce noted that she only lost control of her character once in a 4-hour stint, and that was more of seemed like some sort of minimal scripted sequence where the game wanted her to focus on something, as opposed to having more freeform stuff. But I love the idea of, you're choosing to sit down to talk to people, you're choosing when to get up and leave, you're sort of intuitively pushing buttons to accept weapons and items off people. It's all going to be constant. I guess, what do you think of that? Because that feels like the next level of first-person RPG.
Yeah, definitely. It feels kind of like almost like an immersive sim or something where, if you play Prey 2016, 18?
17?
Time doesn't make any sense, but yeah, like the latest Prey, when everything that you kind of control is very much in universe, you know what I mean? When you're scrolling through emails, you're touching screens like actually that are in game, you're not just navigating a UI. And I feel like this is kind of like a variation on that, when you don't necessarily cut to a directed cutscene. It's still obviously directed to a fashion, but you're very much still in the character's head, and you are making those minute decisions that, they don't add anything necessarily to the story, but they certainly add to the immersion. Like you said, even like the ability of deciding when to sit down and when to stand up adds a kind of, an element of role playing that, again, it doesn't necessarily dramatically change the story or dramatically change the encounter, but it does dramatically change how you perceive your V, you know what I mean? Like the very act of standing or sitting says a lot about, who they are, at least in my eyes. Like that's the kind of tiny little detail I love. But you're also talking to someone, Scott Tilford, who every time they save their game in Fallout 3 would find a nice little bench to sit down on, because I felt like that made a lot of sense in the universe. Like, so I absolutely love those tiny little details and those tiny moments of control that you actually get.
Same, man. I mean, yeah, in any Bethesda game, I'll kick it out to third person and I'll find something to sit on, and I'll just sort of sit there weirdly stoically and rotate the camera around. I love a good sit prompt. Anyway, we've talked about sitting in Cyberpunk way too much. Let's talk about combat. So Eurogamer noted that there's pretty much 3 strands to this: stealth, gunplay, and hacking. Those are sort of the 3 main strands that the way you'll bulk your character out. And you can put points towards hacking. You can start doing those sort of things, or you might want to focus on gunplay, etc. So in terms of stealth, they said that it was quite basic. In terms of, you can tag enemies, you can upgrade different perks to tag enemies and watch them through walls. You can also do like basic stealth takedowns. You want to crouch, get behind people. But they did know that there is a new animation, or a cool animation, where you can take someone down, and if there's any object nearby that you can stash a body in, you can just roll that straight into that animation, which is cool. I think you can do that in one of the new in Hitman 2. But I like the idea that, you can take someone out, stash the body, move on. I like the idea of them just, encouraging forward momentum. But yeah, in terms of stealth, you do have all these different upgrades. You have this thing called a cyber deck, which is how you're fleshing out different upgrades. And there's that. So that in terms of stealth, it seems like basic enough, but at least it keeps you moving. Gunplay again, you can crouch, you can take behind cover. It doesn't have a it doesn't have a lock system. You're not locking to cover. You're just sort of crouching and knowing when you're in cover. So it feels like, Alana Pierce noted multiple times that it's not a first-person shooter. Like, you shouldn't think of this as an all-out action game. It's an RPG with shooting elements, which I guess is closer to like a Fallout 4. And the last
Yeah.
part, the last strand, is the hacking side of it. Although, no, I'm going to talk about melee fights because,
Go on,
again, on the Eurogamer side, they talked about boxing and melee encounters and said that you punch with the right trigger, you block with the left, you can do dodges on circle or B, but they said you have to double tap it to sort of do a dodge, but you can also do counters. They said that stuff was quite awkward, but like, they hope you're going to get used to it over time. But I guess to sort of quickly talk about that, did you play Chronicles of Riddick?
Oh my god, I did a long time ago. When they
that's what
had
it reminds me of.
Was it the remaster? Was it Escape from Butcher Bay or something where they had the few games together?
They did a couple, yeah. There was, I can't even think what you call. There was a whole thing where Vin Diesel launched the Riddick franchise and it didn't really get off the ground, but they were great at the time. But in terms of the games, that's what it reminds me of. In terms of, they said there's a lot of like weight to the encounters. Various sort of coverage mentioned that there's a lot of weight to punches and things like that, and you can get arm blades. That's one of the customizable things. And so like there is that. But I guess how do you usually come down on first person melee combat?
I think it can be done, well. It always depends on, you don't want the Bethesda kind of Oblivion-style floatiness where you feel like your actions are just going through people rather than actually hitting something. I think it is quite tricky, though. I think, first-person movement when you're trying to be as agile as you are in Cyberpunk is always quite difficult to pull off. But from what I've seen, and I was looking at a Digital Foundry kind of breakdown as well, where you saw like those arm blades in action. And it was kind of like you were the Predator or something, like you were this, super powerful dude with these electrified blades, but it looks fluid. Obviously we haven't played it, but when you go into an RPG like this, even The Witcher 3, which I think has good combat, you're not expecting it to be industry leading. If it's anything more than competent, in my opinion, that's like a huge win, especially when you're trying to pull off a bunch of different systems. Like you say, there's a blend of hacking, stealth, and gunplay, and that's almost exactly what we got in the recent Deus Ex games. But this, to me, looks kind of a bit more robust and a bit more like, you're not just leaning on the fact that, it's an RPG, so we can excuse a bit of clunkiness. It feels like they've really tried, like Fallout 4 did to its credit, to kind of make it work on its own kind of mechanical level.
Yeah, I mean, you're still going to be doing like a lot of this stuff, a lot of stealth, a lot of hacking, a lot of combat, whichever one you like put your points into. So they need to have like worthwhile systems there. But I think the overall takeaway seems to be across the board. It's just the level of detail that's here, the amount of conversations you can have, the amount of interactions that you can have. That's the thing that is like truly next level. It seems like obviously they're going to need a shooting model, a stealth model to supplant those things. But that's not why you should play this. I think various sort of write-ups have said like, look, this isn't GTA in a cyberpunk city, even though whenever, various people, when they talk about the driving mechanics, compare it to GTA and say it doesn't have the sort of weight, the cars don't have the same sort of weight as driving in GTA. But I just don't view it that way. I think you shouldn't go into this expecting GTA in a cyberpunk city. It's going to be more like a cyberpunk Skyrim by the sounds of it.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, the weird comparisons, because even though, like, when The Witcher 3 came out, a lot of people were comparing it to Rockstar games, obviously, because that was, like, a hugely detailed open world. But, like, CD Projekt Red's titles are doing, complex things that Rockstar games aren't. Like, you've got all these, like, interweaving systems that are coming together to create a definitive RPG experience. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to compare the driving in GTA 5 with the driving in Cyberpunk, or the horses in Red Dead Redemption 2 with the horses in The Witcher 3, if that makes sense. Like, obviously, the comparisons are there, but they're not working necessarily within the same framework or genre. Yes, they're both sandbox making developers, but they're not operating on kind of the similar levels or going for the same goals, if that makes sense.
Yeah, man. It gives me way more of like a kind of that Bethesda thing where it's like, here's this giant interconnected world. Like again, various journalists sort of said, look, you can look out a window and see cars moving around or see people walking around and know that it's all being rendered in real time. Like none of it is this, sort of scripted sequence. You are just one person in this giant mass of interconnected AI systems and different sort of dynamic interactions that are all popping off left, right, and center. And that's part of the draw as well. It is being in that world. So the last strand of the combat side is hacking. Apparently you use LB or L1 for the quick hack menu. This is very much sounds like Watch Dogs. You hold LB or L1, it changes the overlay and you can see different parts of the environment to interact with. You then press RB and you can interact with anything, or the vast majority of different things like ceiling fans or TVs or different people's implants or whatever. So if you want to go down the hacking route, they have made it like a dedicated button, which I love the idea of. They also say that you use a resource called memory when you're doing this. So that's the thing you want to like bulk up. I think it was Eurogamer made the comparison between memory and mana in like an RPG, and I guess because these are sort of ranged, you're hacking in and affecting different things, they're almost like magic attacks, I guess. So I think hacking is kind of always like Cyberpunk's version of magic anyway, so it's like that seems like the way they're going to do that. But I love the idea of them doing a hotkey that's always, you can just like literally quick hack, you can just bust those things out in the middle of a combat scenario. Like, I think that's a really cool idea.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds almost like, an evolution of the signs in The Witcher, you know what I mean? You have kind of like these base skills that you can fire off and they need to be, recharged, or you need to refill this meter or whatever. And I think, the Watch Dogs comparison is really good as well. Like, for me, I love that stuff in both Watch Dogs 1 and 2. The ability to not only interact with kind of enemies and the gadgets and the electronics that are on them, or in this case, like the implants and the augments, but also like the environment as well, to kind of force the developers to think about the level design a bit more and not just have you funnel through a few different corridors. I think hopefully that should lead to kind of like, more robust ways to navigate the environment. There were a few things that I was looking at when I was watching the gameplay, and it was kind of like the verticality of it. Obviously there's going to be, stealth takedowns when you can jump off the top of something and come down and like take a dude out. But like the way the kind of movement system kind of complemented the ability to quickly get around the levels, like jump from one level to another, and kind of like continue the fight without it kind of becoming static. Because the worry for me was when they announced this cover system, even though you're not stuck to it, I still wondered whether it was going to be this kind of almost stilted stop and pop kind of system that we got in perhaps, like Killzone or something that had a kind of quasi cover system for a little while. And that's what I didn't want. I wanted it to be more fluidly, to be able to kind of fluidly move between hacking and stealth and gunplay all in the same combat encounter. And it feels like you can hear, like if you're not stuck to one avenue that you go down.
Yeah, I love that. Like, I love them prioritizing just movement and fluidity, and like obviously a whole big part of the Cyberpunk experience is full on escapism. Like you want to rank up your V in different ways, and you kind of want to get stuck into a certain scenario. And it reminds me of as a quick shout out to 2013 Syndicate, because that is a very cool first person shooter. I'm sure it's made by the Riddick people, but at the same time, you can just hack into enemies. You can take cover somewhere and then see through walls and affect different things without having to leave cover. Syndicate's a great game if you want to get a taste of Cyberpunk first-person shooter stuff. So in terms of wider world things, these are some things that I sort of noted down. One, crimes will happen around the city just as you're moving around. You can get a wanted level if you do sort of ridiculous stuff. There is a police presence and they will come after you. But also you can solve crimes. If you see something unfolding, you can get stuck into the middle of it and help. So that's like one thing. Another thing, your car is pretty much treated like Roach. You can just double tap one of the buttons. And they said that, again, various journalists just said that your car will just pop up like next to you. I guess they just render it so it's always out of your view, and it's always just there on the road or whatever. So there's that. One of the journalists noted that they deliberately went off the beaten path and just started exploring, and found that one of the collectible things, one of the items, are called shards. These are sort of various small short stories, pieces of literature, kind of Elder Scrolls style, like little books and novels or whatever that are hidden around the world. Some of them are about the history of Night City itself. So I guess they'll sort of detail like different districts or how different gangs came together. Someone else also mentioned cyber psychos, which is the name that they've given to mini bosses that you can find around the world. They'll be higher level, and you have to make the choice if you want to go after them. They'll be in different facilities or encampments or whatever it is. But there's a narrative side to it. Basically, cyber psychos is the name given to people who have lost all their humanity. In the Cyberpunk IP, that you're always balancing your humanity stat. Like you can get fully mechanized, cybernetic face, whatever, but your humanity score will go down because there's fundamentally less human in you. Cyber psychos are people that have gone fully augmented and lost their minds. And so the narrative side is that you can find out why that happened, what happened to them, and you can take them on. They're still sub-bosses. But when you defeat them, you can choose whether to kill them or you might want to spare them based on what you found out about them. I love that. That's such a CDPR twist on like a mini-boss.
Yeah, there's a couple things like that in what's been revealed so far that I wanted to find out more about this world. You know what I mean? Like that's such a cool idea of, it's not necessarily original where you're putting these augments in your body and you're making yourself kind of closer to an android than you are human. So therefore your humanity meter comes down. But like properly diving into that aspect through gameplay and features and mechanics is kind of like a winning mix, because it's not just there in the background to read, for instance. I think they kind of tap into that with, let me get this right, is it the brain dance feature as well?
Yeah.
Where you can
brain
kind
dancing
of,
I've got as one of our next things.
Right. Well, this is like where you can hack into someone's brain, and you do that in a kind of gameplay fashion to kind of like assess crime scenes sometimes. You know what I mean? You can have a bird's eye view of what this character you're hacking into saw, and then you can hack into other things within that simulation, kind of like Arkham Knight or Detroit Become Human. But the lore behind that I found so fascinating. Like they were talking about, there are the regular versions of this brain dance that you can buy, like the legal versions, for video games or movies or, porn and stuff. But also there are kind of like black market versions of it. Like the one that we saw in the trailer was called Flatliners. So you jump into the brain of someone who's died and like live out their final moments to experience kind of the thrill of it and understand how it works. Obviously without putting yourself in that same situation. I thought that was such a cool idea, and how, by going through that process, do you lose some of your humanity? Do you gain some perspective on that feeling? Is it something that you shouldn't flirt with? Have we given each other too much power? I just thought that raised so many kind of cool, interesting questions just from one gameplay gimmick, and it made me excited to see what else is like that in, the rest of the 40-hour experience or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, man. Well, the gameplay bit where they showed the brain dancing thing off, because you are just literally experiencing a chunk of time, but it's a chunk of time, and it's a chunk of someone else's existence. All the emotions come with that, all the different thoughts that they had. It's whatever they were experiencing. So in the gameplay section that they showed off, it's V experiencing a heist, or someone robbing a store, and then it's like all the different feelings that they had and why they were feeling it. But yeah, that just blows the gameplay side wide open, because you can experience assumedly you can experience everything from heists to skydiving to whatever the hell they can think of. The last thing, which is obviously the thing that's doing the rounds at the minute, is the old cheeky genital customization. Just throwing that in. So everyone talked about the character customizer. There's a ridiculous amount of things that you can tweak. Apparently there's 11 separate body parts that you can get to. Some are passive things. Some are going to have active differences in the world, like blade arms, or swapping out your legs. Apparently you can get silent running as an option. You can do like a double jump or a much bigger jump. You can do all the stuff where you change your like cranium. You can have that like deep sort of, change your face so it just looks like one giant computer on the front of your face. There's all the genital stuff. There's different penis sizes. They've gone all out. The thing that I love, because as much as it's like, it just seems ridiculous on the surface of it to be like, hey, by the way, we spent, 8 years and here's a whole catalogue of different dong. Yeah. I like the idea that in terms of cyberpunk fiction, it is just that idea that, like skin is just like bodies are just meat. It's just this thing that's just there, and we're slowly sort of, like transhumanism, we're moving forward, we're bringing in all these different sort of bio augments, and we're changing ourselves, and what does that mean, and how much does that lose humanity, and as you become more machine-like, what does that mean for, a soul, and things like that. So it all gets around to that. It's all that idea of just customizing a body, a piece of meat, like sculpting something, almost like the dude at the beginning of BioShock, who's completely, like, just doesn't even view the human form as like a living thing to be respected anymore. It's just something to be molded. Where did you come down on all of the character customization stuff?
No, it's cool, man. Like when you explain it like that, and like sort of philosophy behind it, like it is so interesting, and those are kind of themes I want the game to go into. How much kind of focus we put on the body, and whether the body is kind of like attached to the soul, or whether it's just kind of like this separate kind of entity, and the kind of disassociation with that. Like if they can handle that with kind of respect and flair, that would be like so interesting, and kind of something that hasn't truly been kind of like dived into in terms of, from a mechanical perspective. Character customization is almost, usually always just for aesthetics and kind of cosmetics, and it doesn't have necessarily an impact on how the character sees themselves. But if they can kind of integrate that nicely and, like I said, respectfully into the game, that would be awesome. On the other hand, I don't want to have an existential crisis, Scott Tailford, because already when it comes to RPGs, I spend far too long choosing, genuinely fretting over which gender to play as, over how my hair should look, over, my body type and stuff like that. So when you add on top dong size and how I want to style my pubes, mate, like, I don't know.
5
I'm going to
types,
be there. Launch day, you're going to be like 10 hours in, and you're going to be like, Josh, how are you finding it? And I'm going to be like, Scott, I don't know, man. I'm not past
Kills are straight, mate.
I'm not past the opening screen because I don't know what colour to have me pubes. You know what I mean? In this lockdown era that we're in, where we can't even get a haircut and stuff, I'm gonna have to live vicariously through these characters, mate. Is all I'm saying.
The thing that is terrifying, or could not be more 2020, is that Cyberpunk's pubic options are way more in-depth than our own heads have had access to across the last 4 months. So yeah, I guess we have to wait and see how else the rest of that stuff shakes out. But yeah, I mean, let us know what you think down in the comments below. Maybe you've picked up other sort of various gameplay details and features that you can sum up in a couple of sentences that are worth sharing with the rest of us, because this is the stuff that I've found so far. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
I'll catch you next time. Pew.
Bye.